don't know about this? Well, there's so much we don't know about this. This is very new science. But one, we don't know how these chemicals interact with one another in the human body. It's very hard to do these studies on humans. So it's a big experiment. This has also been done on newborns. There's a study that some of you might be familiar with called 10 Americans coming from the Environmental Working Group, looking at the cord blood, the umbilical cord blood of newborns, and finding roughly 280 chemicals that have been linked to obesity and brain tumors and all kinds of issues, cancers, carcinogens. So we firmly believe that there is enough research to suggest proceed with caution. We don't yet know without any shadow of doubt how these chemicals enter our body and what role plastic plays, but we feel we have enough information to at least proceed with caution. And one final area that we're looking into and that inspired us to start doing this work is what is the ultimate fate of plastic in the ocean? There have been some very interesting studies coming out of sea education showing that down to a certain size class, despite population increase and despite production increases of plastic, we're not seeing a huge spike in the microplastics. So what's happening to it? Where is it all going? Well, we know that plastics in the ocean break down through UV light. They become brittle through photodegradation, wave action, mechanical action in the waves, break plastics down into these small pieces. We know that plastics also wash up back on shores, on shorelines. So when people talk to us about going out to the middle of the ocean to clean up the gyres, we tell them go to the islands and the gyres, because they act almost like nets sieving this plastic from the ocean. And there you get more bang for your buck if you're looking to clean up tons of plastic and turn it into fuel or recycle it back into something. Many different ideas. This is a photo from the first expedition we did, the Azores, off the coast of Portugal. And this is one of the areas of the beach that's just awash in plastic from the gyre. And then with the ingestion question, when animals are ingesting these small, buoyant pieces of plastic, these are plastics that float, because another huge area of this puzzle that hasn't really been explored is what's happening to the plastics that sink. Because roughly 50% of plastics are negatively buoyant, roughly 50% will sink. So there's also a yo-yo effect for plastics. And one of the things that we're curious about is what effect does this have on the animals that are deep sea fish and that surface and then return to the depths. When they're filling up their stomachs with buoyant plastics, might that cause them to have to expend more energy resurfacing? So these are all unknowns and much area for exploration. And then do plastics will they eventually break down? Will they eventually biodegrade through bacteria? Over the course of time, perhaps on a time scale that humans will understand, there are different bacteria that will break down plastics. And there have been some very publicized studies, some that actually some very young people have done. A 16-year-old did a study looking at the ability of certain bacteria to digest PVC. There have been new studies showing that certain bacteria will, on a small scale, digest plastic. So if we turned off the tap today and humans disappeared, perhaps over time, new bacteria would evolve to digest this stuff. But we just can't wait that long. This isn't a viable solution. So I want to share with you a little bit about the way we've used our science to inform solutions. There are many people who believe that you should create a firm boundary between science and solutions, activism, advocacy. We're not of that camp, and I get off easily because I'm not actually a scientist, so I have full license to be an advocate. But we feel the responsibility, having seen what we've seen around the world, to take the information that we're finding and to share it to really drive on-land solutions. And this is one example of what we found in a new area. So this is the first time that we ventured out of the oceans and into a freshwater system in the Great Lakes. This was last summer, a partnership through SUNY Fredonia out of New York, aboard the tall ship Niagara, which was just a gorgeous boat. And again, I couldn't be on that one. Pregnancy. But what we found, doing the exact same protocols, exact same methodology, using our trawl to skim the surface of the lake, 3 lakes in that case, and right now our staff is at lake, not at sea, covering the last 2 of the Great Lakes. So this shows what we found throughout Lake Huron, Superior, and Erie. In Lake Erie, we found something very surprising. We found a few samples that were off the charts. The highest count of plastic, the highest degree of plastic by count from any ocean sample we've collected anywhere in the world. And here's one of those samples, 1,596 particles of plastic in a single sample. So we were very intrigued by this and started looking closer and closer under a microscope, finding these perfectly round spherical beads. And looking closer. This is under a very powerful microscope. Now those of you who know our organization will already know what the punchline is, where these came from. If you don't, maybe you can scratch your head for a moment. Exfoliants. So the two on the left are the culprits, the two on the right are the natural alternatives that have been using. I remember as a kid, my mom had the apricot kernel scrub that you could use to exfoliate your face. Jojoba beads or cocoa shells. There are many biodegradable natural alternatives there. The two on the left, when you look on the back, it's right there, microbeads, and if you look in the ingredients, polyethylene. So, let's get on that. So we used this as an opportunity to create kind of a process for taking on campaigns. We've been to all 5 gyres, we've done the research, we're going to continue doing research in the future to establish a global baseline, but now we feel it's imperative to use this information to drive solutions. I'm not going to go through this whole list here, but basically we identified a problem, we figured out where it was coming from, we were able to trace this material to a product, which is rare because normally when we find these microplastics, it's impossible to tell what they came from. But this was a unique opportunity to see actually where they're coming from. And we use this as a basis for a social media campaign, a grassroots organizing campaign in partnership with some groups in Europe and many different groups here, part of the Clean Seas Coalition, to launch a whole campaign. And to our great surprise, it actually worked. It started with Unilever making a global announcement that they were going to phase out these plastic beads by 2015. And that set the stage for us to be able to lobby Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, and L'Oreal, all of whom who have committed to phase out plastic beads by 2015, in the case of Procter & Gamble, 2017. A collaboration, and this to me showed the power of grassroots organizing. It would be almost impossible to think that one small nonprofit could move a company as big as Procter & Gamble or Johnson & Johnson, but together, through coalitions, we're able to achieve some pretty remarkable wins with corporate America, which is very exciting. Now, this was admittedly a unique example because very different from a plastic bottle or a plastic bag. Most plastic products are not designed so that we, the consumer, take this product when we're done with it and fling it into the ocean. They're not designed that way. They are designed, in theory, to go into our municipal waste management system. These beads, on the other hand, were designed to go from the consumer's face down the drain and, in many cases, straight out into the wastewater system during overload situations. But we want to use this model, this idea of using science to drive solutions through a network of grassroots campaigns and communities to see if we can achieve some other wins. And here's one that I pose to you. Around the world, and you've seen the photos from Chris Jordan, we find bottle caps by the gazillions. This was a little design I made in the sand in Hawaii after spending a couple hours on Camilo Beach, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, also called Jump Beach. Now maybe leashing the lid is one possibility, but I'm pretty confident that there must be some pretty significant brain power in this room to come up with a better alternative for this plastic bottle cap from a different material that we're seeing escape by the millions into the marine environment, into our land. So I pose this to you as a challenge. Some other categories for solutions, and then I want to open it up to dialogue, to comments and suggestions, is innovating to the solution. I mentioned in my opening that plastic pollution is a design flaw. We need to design for better recovery, actually design for recycling instead of creating these hybrid monsters that create a lot of confusion for the public. What do I do with this? Where do I put it? Is it recyclable? But actually designing with recovery, reuse, or recycling in mind, which will increase our recycling efficiency. Waste to energy, this is a huge category, and there's a lot of controversy around some of it, but waste to energy may be a wonderful application for some areas that just don't have the infrastructure yet to deal with waste, as long as it's done without tremendous pollution, air pollution, which we've also seen. And then biopolymers. There's a lot of controversy about this yet, but we absolutely need an alternative to petroleum-based plastics or natural gas-based plastics, fossil fuel-based. We need to come up with alternatives that are truly sustainable, that create a closed-loop system, and that in many cases are truly biodegradable. Some of the issues here is there are different kinds of bioplastics. We're, as ocean people, we really want to see something that's marine degradable, but I truly believe that, that there are good alternatives here waiting to happen. Supporting legislation. Legislation is, as we all know, very slow to enact, but when it does happen, it's extremely powerful. Things like bag bans, which are now sweeping the country and the world, or extended producer responsibility, which I know is becoming the conventional and accepted idea of solutions, that we can actually build recycling into the production of products, put the responsibility and the incentives back on the producers to come up with products that have some value at the end of their life cycle, and get rid of that design flaw. Extended producer responsibility, we mentioned that. And then for everyday people, to really think about voting with your pocketbook, that cliche that we've all heard, but to buy products that have some sort of recovery plan. If it can't be recycled or composted or reused, perhaps we shouldn't be buying it at all. This is not always possible, but we can strive to do our best. As I said before, though, education is incredibly important, but we're never going to be able to convince all 7 billion people and rising to do the right thing. We can't expect people always to do the right thing. We need to make it convenient and possible, so that at the end of the life cycle of the products that we're all using, if it does escape into the environment, it's not going to create massive problems, and it's benign by design. It won't be harmful in the environment. And to lead by example, the things that we all can do every day in our lives, simple things like avoiding single-use disposables, doing beach cleanups, because although I talked about cleanups as a lesser alternative, cleanups are essential, and beach cleanups are gyre cleanups. The gyres shift and wobble, and every few years have a cycle of budding back up on the coasts and depositing a lot of this plastic. Plastic will eventually spit back out of a gyre onto land. So by cleaning our neighborhoods, not just coastal, inland as well, by cleaning up our neighborhoods, our streets, and our beaches, this is essentially gyre cleanup as well. Getting our city councils involved, getting our schools and our office places to go zero waste, and getting involved with organizations. And I want to pose an invitation to you all. I mentioned before that one of our platforms for engagement are these expeditions, that we like to invite people to come join us to see this issue firsthand, to see what it's like really to be out in the middle of the ocean, thousands of miles from land, and pull up sample after sample after sample contaminated with plastic. There really is no pristine anymore, and plastics have really only been with us in heavy use for the last 50 years or so. But in that time, we've managed to virtually change the seascape, to change our oceans worldwide. Pretty amazing of us. So in 2014, we're going to be returning to the North Atlantic. We learned a big lesson that you don't cross the North Atlantic in January. So we have a key gap in our data that we call now the hurricane gap. So we're going to repeat that voyage in 2014 with 4 legs around the North Atlantic, shorter legs and longer legs. So I invite you all, if you're interested in coming out and seeing this issue, to inform your work, to inform your communities, and to bring these first-hand experiences back to land. The invitation is open. So with that, I would love to open it up for any questions, comments, suggestions for solutions that I didn't cover. And again, I'm just so grateful to be here to be able to share this message with you. So thank you. I was worried about not taking too much time, so we'll have good time for a conversation.
I'm wondering if you know of any research on capturing microbeads in wastewater treatment operations.
Yeah, that's one that we've been looking into because the jury is out. So we did a little bit of research in Portland, and we're actually working now on doing a study here in Los Angeles, going right to the effluent and doing our same sampling to see to what degree can these be captured by a traditional wastewater treatment system. We did look into this, and we've gotten mixed reviews from talking to different wastewater treatment facilities. I learned the term flocculation, which I had never heard, and I love learning new words like that. So it may be possible that in some wastewater treatments, we are in fact capturing these beads, banding them together so that we can skim them. But I would hazard to guess that around the world, there are many treatment systems that are not capturing these beads, and they're definitely escaping out into the environment. But that's a great question. And do you know of any? Okay. Does anyone else in the room? Or is anyone interested in pursuing these kinds of studies? If you are, we're very easy to contact.
Anna, I have a comment on that. In our city, we actually, skim off all the plastic.
Could you go to the microphone?
Sure. In our city, what we do in our water treatment facilities, we actually skim the plastics, then grind them, then send them to the next facility. So in that action, we're just grinding it into smaller and smaller pieces to do this. So it might be one place, if we skim those off earlier, it wouldn't just be going down the stream.
Yeah. Good point.
Hi, I met you a long time ago.
Yes, I remember you.
And it's amazing that what you're doing, it really is. So I just heard a Green Song plastic thing, and she was from Kaiser, and she had A and B, and she was basically said PSOD and other birth reproduction problems, they've been directly related to phthalates and bisphenol A, which is in the ocean with the fish. So I'm just wondering, so do you eat fish today?
I'm mostly vegetarian. I don't eat chicken or beef. I do eat fish on occasion. I mean, if I'm out and it happens to be there, I won't say no to it, but I never purchase it. Or most people are shocked to hear that I would ever eat fish after seeing what we've seen, but if it's not one thing, it's another. There are many reasons to not eat fish. I mean, overfishing and sustainability are probably the biggest reasons, but yeah, I do eat fish from time to time. Yeah. But to your point about, potential birth defects, I'm sure you've all heard of the book, Our Stolen Future. If you haven't, it's a fascinating read about endocrine disruptors, hormone mimics, and how these might be affecting human health. Yes?
Carrie, I first of all commend your presentation, and it was fabulous to see the science behind this, and very disturbing at the same time.
Oh, good.
And I really appreciate having all the solutions outlined, because oftentimes when we don't see the solutions connected, people don't know where to turn and they're left hopeless. One of the solutions you put up there, though, I need to comment on the issue of waste to energy.
I knew it. I knew that was wrong phrase for this crowd. Yes.
Okay. My comment's done.
No, actually,
seriously, let me elaborate. I'm on the board of the Zero Waste International Alliance. The Zero Waste International Alliance has adopted a definition of zero waste that's the only peer-reviewed, internationally accepted definition. That definition is accepted by the environmental, zero waste, and recycling communities. By definition, when we're striving for zero waste, we're saying that all discarded materials are resources. We don't want to burn or bury them, and we are striving for 0 discharges to air, water, and land. By definition, we then elaborate measures of performance towards that goal, but that's the goal. We summarize that as no burn, no buried, no discharges. And the reason for no burn, and included in that, is any technology that is over biological temperature, over 200 degrees